This is the Bible Ranger, and today's title is How Satan Destroys the Family, episode 120, part 1. There'll be several parts of this, and we'll be getting in depth in it, and some of it won't even be PC. So let's get going. Satan is on the attack. There's a big problem in American churches today. We don't know who we are biblically in Christ. Now, since very few Christians are reading their Bibles, it creates a vacuum. And because of movies and music and television, public schools, and the internet, it's occupying most of our lives. So instead of us impacting the world's impacting the churches, even in the pulpits. Now, the world is changing the definition of words and the role in families and of families. So you might be saying, that doesn't affect me. I'm not feeling this change. Really? Well, we're going to go ahead and test that. We'll talk about womanhood first. Satan is attacking us on manhood, on womanhood, on marriages, and family. Now, in Ephesians 5:22, it says this: Wives, submit yourselves to your husbands. And then we're already, just by saying that, we're at war with the culture. And the verse is not even finished. Feminists come to mind, and they're at war with the gospel and marriages. So they translate this as men being the oppressors and women being the oppressed whenever you hear a verse like this. A marriage is made up of a husband and a wife. A husband being a man and a wife being a woman. And it's even crazy that I have to explain that, but that's the only marriage acceptable in the Bible. In Genesis 1:27, it says that God made man, a male and female. He created them. I've actually heard an LGBT person actually say that God created them, since they call themselves them, so they were part of creation. And I'm like, wow, you are in such darkness. But it's right there. That's the only ones that God actually accepts. Let's go ahead and read the verses. Ephesians 5:22. Wives, submit to husband as unto the Lord. Verse 23. The husband is the head, even as Christ is head. Verse 24. As the church is subject to Christ, wives to the husbands. Verse 25. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. Verse 27, 26, and 27. Christ cleansed the church to present it to himself. Verse 28. Men, love your wives. Basically, just like you take care of your body, take care of your wives as unto yourselves. Verse 29, cherish your wives as Christ the church. Now the Bible points us to the reality of the mystery, because that's what it is, the mystery of the church. And Christ has made an example of the future marriage to him with husbands and wives. And it basically is a picture of the redemption that we find in the gospel. So the Bible is teaching us order in the marriage. That's what he's doing, order in the marriage. Now the Bible teaches headship and submission as unto the Lord. So you're not, well, I'll get into that in a second. It's not a bad thing, but the world hates it. Another word for this would be patriarchy. Now the world sees it as the patriarchy. Now while the Bible sees it as headship and leadership, this culture hates the patriarchy. They've seen it as evil and as dominance, like man is dominance over the women. And these are some things that you see here. You can see this poster here. The liberated woman, smash the patriarchy. It's time for the fall of the patriarchy. And over here, destroy the patriarchy. And you see a hammer there. And even to the point where women say, I'm not taking the last name of that man, but I'll keep my father's last name instead, which makes no sense. But even in some churches, it's fought against. Headship, they'll say this, some churches will say this. Headship is a product of the fall. The curse is not valid anymore because of Jesus. Jesus lifted the law and the curses. So let's examine this for a second. It almost sounds like a reasonable argument. So in Genesis 3:16, it says after Adam and Eve fell, God gave each of them curses. And the two curses for the woman was, I will greatly increase the labor pains from having children. And the second was I didn't put it here, but the second was that you will desire to rule your husband, but he will rule over you. And basically what happened in the fall is that the harmony between the men and the women of a marriage is gone. But the man is still the head. It used to be where it wasn't that Adam and Eve were equals. They're equal in value, but they both weren't the head. And I'll explain that in a second. So to show that men were always the head and the leader from creation is 5 examples. Number 1, Adam was made before Eve, headship. Number 2, Eve was made for Adam, headship also. Number 3, Eve was brought to Adam, that's also headship. Number 4, the woman was named twice by man. The first time he called her woman, which means man with a womb. And number 2, he called her Eve, which means the mother of all living, which is a beautiful name. Number 5, this is pretty important. Romans 5:12. Sin came into the world because of Adam. So, even though Eve ate from the fruit first, it wasn't until Adam ate from the fruit that sin came into the world. They noticed they were naked. They went ahead and sewed leaves, fig leaves for clothing, and they were hiding from God. So also in the Bible, it explains that this Adam that fell was the first Adam. And then Christ, when he came to the earth, he was the second Adam, and he made things right. So submitting, or to submit, is a military term. It means in one direction. And by the way, it's not a matter of value, okay, because men and women are equally valued in God's sight. But it's a matter of order. And to explain order, a military term would be the best. You have enlisted people and you have officers. If you're not familiar, enlisted people are the sergeants and the privates and the sergeants. The officers are the people that are lieutenants and captains and majors and colonels. And let's say he has 10 months, but this would also work if he had 10 weeks or he had 10 days. The enlisted is actually more valuable in the military because he has way more training. He knows how it works, and he can teach the officer tons of stuff. But in order for this to work, the officer is actually in charge, whether he's 10 days or 10 minutes in the military. So it's not a value thing because, Adam, when he saw Eve, he said, you are bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. So going back to some churches that they fight against, they think that because of the fall that men are in charge. If Christ, when he came, he did away with all that, then the first part of the curse was that women's pain were greatly increased. So if Christ did away with that, then women's pain would also not be there anymore. So the curse is still here, okay? And it's not, once again, it's not a sense of value, it's just a sense of order. Feminism versus the patriarchy. Now, there's a rave on the internet about how many women are regretting taking the career path because of feminism, and they end up alone and without children. Now, in this picture here, there's kind of a comparison between patriarchy and feminism. Of course, feminism, they're in heavy support of abortion, while in patriarchy, they want to have kids. And this is generally speaking, of course, not every single person. They support motherhood. You want to stay home. You even want to work. You want to be a mother. Now, the career comes first here with the feminism. And sometimes the husband gets in the way, the children get in the way, and they end up having children later in life while they're wising up. Now they can't have children because they're too old now. It ends up more of a divorce because most men don't want this. I'm not saying that women are not to be treated equally. I'm not saying that. I'm talking about the feminism ideology. While patriarchy support marriages and to support family. And a lot of times these feminists, they end up being alone because most men don't like that. And it ruins the culture, while the patriarchy is good for civilization. Now, cultures affected by biblical Christianity now are where women are the safest, the most protected, the most cherished in the world. However, it's where women complain the most about the patriarchy, believe it or not. Submitting unto the Lord, it's not because men deserve it or are worthy of it, is in spite of it because Christ said so. Now, the husband and wife relationship of headship and submission is an imagery of Christ and the bride. That's what it is. It's simply said. Husbands, love your wives. As a culture, we no longer view women as a weaker vessel to be protected. So it's why we have now like people like Leah Thomas, who swam for the men's team for 3 years, who was a mediocre swimmer, like the middle of the pack. So he had an idea. He switched to the female team, tied a female, and was given the championship over the actual woman. I mean, to her credit, she is racing against a guy in great physical shape, and she still tied him. And instead of getting at least equal awards or rewards, they gave it to him. And to make things worse, then later he was declared as Woman of the Year. That's madness. Now you have something like Phelan Fox, which was a man and did transgender operations. And physically might be looking like a woman, but he has the bone structure, the thickness of skin, the strength of a man. And it got to the point where he fought against a woman and he fractured her skull. And there's many stories like this. This is just two. Now, this is what happens in the name of equality. We end up brutalizing women rather than protecting them. You think it's doing them a favor, but it's not. It's doing the opposite. So that alone is better, husband, love your wives, than the rest of the world. Now, the verse 28, I'll read it again. It says, men love your wives as your own self. Basically, like you're taking care of yourself. You brush your teeth. You feed your body. You drink when you're thirsty. You comb your hair. This is how we are supposed to take care of our wives, like we take care of ourselves. It's not only that she's your wife. In a sense, she's me. So just like you're taking care of yourself, she's part of you, and that's showing them love. Now, this is what the world calls hate. That right there, that explanation. If you carry that forward, it's the same as saying that Christ abuses the church, because they consider us abuser of women because of headship and leadership, the patriarchy. Now, you can't find a better picture to treat women out there than these verses here. But the world sees it as war against us for it. And in a sense, if you think about it, if this is evil patriarchy, so is Christ to the church. And we have blasphemed Christ's love to the church if we're speaking bad about the marriages between husband and wife, because it's a picture of the church. We're also speaking bad about the future picture of marriage of the church and Christ himself. Now, I have a lot more to say. I'm even going to go into LGBTQ and all that, okay? But I have to cut it somewhere. I'm also got to go into the children too. So, the bride of Christ. As a guy, look, it's weird to me, okay, to picture myself as a bride. I'm the first one to tell you that. But this relationship between the church and Christ, it goes beyond human comprehension. It's just, the best, he tried to explain it to us as an example with husband and wife, and we're still not understanding it. So it's way more than that. But if you want to be part of that, you have to repent. You got to accept Jesus. You know that he rose from the dead, and follow him till you die. All right. So check out Romans 10:9 and 10, and check out 1 John 1:9. Now, I want to thank you for looking at this video, and don't forget to subscribe, thumbs up, and share it. That way it will continue to be seen by others. The last series was extremely popular, and a lot more people got to see it because of its popularity, and I thank you very much for that. So this is the Bible Ranger, keeping the Bible simple yet rich in content. Thank you very much.